All right, let's set the scene. Okay. Imagine a lavish dinner party, right? But for a king, no less. There's music, laughter, the clinking of glasses.
The kind of night that's supposed to be etched in history books for all the right reasons.
Exactly. But then everything changes. Gunshots, chaos. And by the end of it, 9 members of Nepal's royal family are dead.
It's a story that's as gripping as it is tragic, and one that's filled with more twists and turns than your average thriller. And the most baffling part.
The official explanation just doesn't quite add up, does it?
Not for a lot of people, no.
So today we're diving headfirst into the Nepalese Royal Massacre. We'll sift through the facts, the theories, and everything in between.
It's a story that captivated the world, and even now, years later, it's still shrouded in mystery.
A mystery that we're going to try and unravel together, right here, right now. So to really grasp the magnitude of what happened, we have to understand Nepal's monarchy. It wasn't just some figurehead position, you know?
Right, this was a monarchy with real teeth, immense power and influence, deeply rooted in the country's history and culture. And their home, the Narayanhiti Palace, it was more than just a residence, it was a symbol.
A symbol that became a crime scene on June 1st, 2001. 9 members of the royal family brutally killed. King Birendra, Queen Aishwarya, their children, Prince Narayan, and Princess Shruti.
And it doesn't stop there. The king's brother, his sister, other close relatives. It was a bloodbath that sent shockwaves throughout the country.
And to make an already unthinkable tragedy even more unbelievable, the finger of blame ends up pointed at the crown prince, Dipendra, the king's own son.
Now, the official story, the one put forward by the government inquiry, was that Dipendra, he just snapped.
Snap.
Well, they claimed he was deeply in love with a woman his family didn't approve of. A forbidden romance, fueling all this inner turmoil. And then you had this backdrop of the country shifting towards a constitutional monarchy.
So less power for the royals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So according to the official narrative, it was all just too much for him. This deadly cocktail of love, frustration, maybe even a sense of powerlessness. And he lashes out. Opens fire on his own family during this gathering meant to be a celebration.
And then to complete the picture of utter despair, he turns the gun on himself.
That's the official story anyway. But there's a catch, of course. Dipendra didn't die right away. He was in a coma for a few days.
So he couldn't tell his side of the story even if he wanted to.
Exactly. And that's just one of many loose threads that makes this case so compelling.
Yeah.
And so frustrating. You start digging into the details and you realize maybe things weren't so neat and tidy.
For one thing, the security at the palace that night, for such a high-profile event, you'd expect it to be airtight, right?
You'd think so, but reports suggest otherwise. And then there's the curious case of Prince Jayanendra, the king's brother.
Jayanendra, conveniently absent during the massacre.
And who, I wonder, ascends to the throne after Dipendra's death. It's like something out of Shakespeare.
Talk about being in the right place at the right time. Or the wrong place, depending on how you look at it. But it's the Dipendra angle, the supposed suicide, that really throws a wrench in the whole thing. Remember, he was right-handed.
And yet, the fatal shot.
Left temple. Just doesn't add up, does it?
Which is where things start to get really interesting. Because when the official narrative doesn't cut it, well, people tend to fill in the blanks themselves.
And in this case, the blanks are filled with some pretty wild theories. It's like a game of Clue, but with a royal twist, right? Everyone's a suspect.
And the prime suspect in a lot of people's eyes, Prince Jayanendra.
The brother who wasn't there and who ultimately benefited from the whole tragedy.
The theory, of course, is that he orchestrated the entire thing, got rid of his brother, King Birendra, and bam, just like that, the throne is his.
And you have to admit, it's not the most far-fetched idea, especially when you consider the public perception at the time. Dipendra, he was generally seen as this modern, forward-thinking guy. Popular, too.
Especially compared to Jayanendra, who, let's be honest, was seen as a bit more, shall we say, traditional.
Out of touch, even.
That's one way to put it. So you can see how this difference in public image plays right into the whole conspiracy theory. Right?
Oh, absolutely. And then, on top of everything else, you've got this little detail that Jayanendra and his family, they just happened to be elsewhere when the bullets started flying. What are the odds, you know? I mean, come on, an entire royal family almost wiped out, and he and his loved ones just escape unharmed.
Yeah, that's a tough one to explain away if you're Jayanendra. And then you add fuel to the fire with this book, Raktakunda.
Pool of Blood, catchy title.
To say the least. But this book, it's based on interviews with 2 palace maids who were actually there that night. And let me tell you, their stories throw a whole different light on things.
They claim they saw some things that just don't line up with the official timeline, things that suggest there was a cover-up.
A cover-up, or at the very least, some serious inconsistencies. And get this, they even suggest that there might have been another shooter.
More than one gunman. Now that's a twist.
It is, isn't it? Now, it's important to note that these maids, their stories haven't been independently verified. But they definitely add another layer of complexity to an already convoluted case, don't they?
They do. It's like trying to solve a puzzle, but half the pieces are missing, and the ones you do have, they don't quite fit together. But let's not forget about the Dipendra was innocent camp. They've got their own theories, and they're equally fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. This theory hinges on the idea that someone else was behind the trigger that night. Someone disguised as the crown prince, setting him up to take the fall.
Talk about an elaborate frame job.
Right. But again, the people who subscribe to this theory, they point to those inconsistencies we talked about. The security, Jindra's absence, and of course that whole left temple right-handed thing. Just, it makes you wonder.
And some eyewitnesses even said they saw more than one person dressed as Dipendra that night. I mean, at that point, you're talking about a full-blown conspiracy.
It does sound like something out of a movie, doesn't it?
And of course, what's a good conspiracy theory without a little foreign intrigue, right?
Yes. The international angle.
Yeah.
Because why not throw some geopolitical maneuvering into the mix?
Some theories go as far as to suggest that foreign powers saw the monarchy as a problem, a barrier to their own interests in the region.
Nepal's strategic location, it's always been a bit of a hot spot in terms of international relations.
So the theory is that they decided to stir the pot, maybe even orchestrate the whole thing, destabilize the country, you know? Classic spy stuff.
Except in this case, there's zero concrete evidence to back it up. It's all speculation at this point.
Pure speculation. But hey, that's what makes these theories so much fun to dissect, right?
Yeah.
But it's important to remember, for as much as we're enjoying connecting the dots here, this isn't just some intellectual exercise.
Right. These are real people, real lives, tragically cut short. A whole family wiped out, a nation left reeling.
And more than 2 decades later, we're still trying to figure out what really happened.
Yeah, it really hits you, the human cost of this whole thing. It's easy to get caught up in the mystery, the theories, but at the end of the day, it's a stark reminder that this wasn't just a story in the headlines. These were real people with families, with lives that were cut tragically short.
And as much as we want answers, as much as we want to solve this puzzle, the truth is, we may never really know what happened that night.
That's the thing about events like this. Sometimes the truth just evaporates. Or maybe is never fully clear to begin with. But what we're left with is this void, and it's human nature to try and fill it.
With theories, with speculation, with whatever we can grab onto, right?
Exactly. And that's what makes this case, and others like it, so endlessly fascinating, don't you think?
I think so. It's like we crave these explanations, these narratives that help us make sense of the senseless.
It's that age-old need for order, for control, especially when faced with something as chaotic and as terrifying as this massacre.
Because if we can find an explanation, even a far-fetched one, maybe we feel a little less afraid.
Perhaps. Or maybe it's just about satisfying our curiosity, our need to know. Whatever the reason, the Nepalese Royal Massacre, it continues to resonate, doesn't it?
It does. And it reminds us that sometimes the most compelling mysteries are the ones that may never be solved. But even without those concrete answers, I think we've learned a lot today, haven't we?
We have. About the power of information, or the lack of it. About the different ways we process grief, loss, and uncertainty. And about the enduring allure of a good mystery.
A mystery that, sadly, had very real consequences. So if you take anything away from this deep dive, let it be this. Sometimes the questions are just as important as the answers. And sometimes the journey of trying to understand, of grappling with these complex, even uncomfortable truths, well, that's where the real learning happens.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And on that note, that's a wrap on this deep dive into the Nepalese Royal Massacre. A story of tragedy, intrigue, and questions that may linger long after the lights go out.